Hi and welcome to the sew along video. So today I'm going to be sewing this out of Sherpa fleece, which is a knit with around about 40% stretch. You could sew the body of this in a woven as long as the band was a rib or something like a cotton lycra, and depending on your collar choice as well, you may need to make that into a cotton lycra or a ribbing. I've allowed 1 centimetre seam allowances on this. I know I normally use 6mm, 1/4 inch, but I'm using 1 centimetre 3/8 for most of them today, simply because this jacket is designed for those thicker, heavier Sherpa or cuddle fleece, poodle fleece I think is another one, plush, those sorts of things. So it's dense, it's heavy, and you do need that little bit of extra to help. You can trim that off with your overlocker if you like. So the majority of our seams are 1 centimetre 3/8 of an inch, going to be sewn with a plain stitch on a sewing machine, and the edges are going to be completed with our overlocker. I suggest you trim a small amount off with your overlocker blade. You can of course sew this on a domestic sewing machine, same thing, using a lightning bolt or a zigzag stitch, and then just finish the edges with a zigzag. So let's just jump straight in. So the zips you're going to need for this garment are open end zips. That means they detach. Sometimes they're called detachables. You could get a double-ended zip, which has a zip pull at the top and the bottom. Entirely up to you, whatever look you want to go for. You may be slightly limited in your colour range. This was the nearest colour I could get to match to my Sherpa. So this is sort of more of a deep cream, and my Sherpa's probably an ecru colour. What I'm going to do is, because most of the zip is hidden, I don't really have a problem with that. It's really just the puller, and I might change the puller out for a metal one later anyway. So the only thing that is non-negotiable about this is the zip length. So for the short jackets they require 1 length, for the long jacket, which is 40 centimetres, and for the long jackets they require 60 centimetres. I'll put those conversions below, and you can't really change that unless you can really, because the pockets will get in the way and it'll all be a major. So the front length maintains. You could reduce this down by 5 centimetres, 2 inches, but you'd need to remove that in the body of the garment somewhere. So as far as it goes, this is a set length. Let's start with the waistband. So this is a piece cut on the fold, and you need to make this either out of something that stretches or a cotton lycra or a ribbing, something like that for contrast. So this is going to need to be able to stretch across. So at either ends you have these pieces here. So what we're going to do is take this insert and place it right sides together. And halfway down you'll see a notch, and we're going to match the notches there. So the reason this is here is so you can do a change of colour or a decorative piece, or if you are sewing this in more of a woven fabric, you could have this as a woven, but the waistband itself would need to be stretch. So we're going to sew one of these pieces to either side of the waistband. So this pattern is mainly made with a 1 centimetre seam allowance, which is unusual for knits, but because this is Sherpa, which is really stretchy, or a plush or something like that, you're going to find this a little bit more challenging to sew. If you're making this in something like a sweatshirting or a French terry, you'll find it easier, but this pattern does have 1 centimetre seam allowances. So what we're going to do is sew at 1 centimetre. And now you can overlock the edge, but there's no real need to on this piece because it's going to be folded in on itself. So when we've got it like that, we're just going to fold it over like so, and I'll pin that in place. And what I've done is just push those seams open, and then just go ahead and sew the same piece to the other end. So here I have the view A side front. On each side front piece you'll have a drill position. So this position shows us where we need an opening for our drawcord. So you need to either stitch a buttonhole, stitch an eyelet, or use a metal snap and put a grommet in there, which is a metal eyelet. So all you need to do is centre your buttonhole over that drill hole, and we want to stitch a buttonhole and we want it parallel to the centre front, and make sure it's only around about 1 centimetre, 3/8 of an inch long. I just put a small snap in the back, or the smallest button I have to do that. Now if you find stitching buttonholes in knit fabric a bit challenging, you can get some tearaway stabiliser and just pop that underneath, so make sure that sits on top of the feed dogs, and that will just stop any catching. Another trick is to just use some light tissue paper under there as well. So when you've done that on one side, repeat on the other side front. For the channel, overlock around all sides of your channel piece. Oh, and just as a side note, I haven't cut anything off as I've trimmed that, as I've overlocked that. I've just overlocked on the raw edge. So now we're going to sew the curve pocket on view A. So you've cut out 2 pairs, which is 4 mirror pieces of the curved pockets. Now, there is a square pocket you can use for view A, but it's different from the square pocket for view B. So if you want to put a square pocket on this, you need to get the other view A pocket piece. Just like if you want to put a curved pocket on view B, you need to get the alternate pocket piece for view B. Probably too much information, but let's come to the front. So here is one of my front pieces, a side front, right side up. So you'll notice here at the side seam we have 3 notches. The first notch is to help guide us with our channel, so we're not going to worry about that at the moment, but the next 2 notches are our pocket notches. So what we're going to do is take one of our pocket pieces and place it right side down, and we want to match the notch on the pocket to the notch at the side seam. And if you've seen the video for the other pocket, it's exactly the same process. We're going to stitch between these notch points at 1 centimetre on both sides of the side front. Right, so I've actually got my correct colour thread in now. And then we're going to snip at an angle down towards the end of that stitching. Remember, we do not want to cut our stitching. Okay, so repeat that on the other side. Then take your back piece and do exactly the same thing with the other pair. Now I won't record this, I'll just jump straight through it. So when you've sewn the pockets to either side of the back, place the back right side up and then place the front that matches it right side down. So our pockets match. What we're going to do now is sew the pockets together 1 centimetre, 3/8 of an inch, and then we're going to go and finish that seam off with our overlocker to tidy it up. So when you've done that on one side, go ahead and repeat it on the other. Okay, so now bring that right sides together. We want the front at the front and the back at the back. And just like we do on the other version, we want to fold this pocket to the front. And just those snips you created earlier, we want to push those out. So we want everything to be sitting nice and flat. And when you've got everything sitting nice and flat, we're going to sew the side seam. So starting at the underarm, sew down at 1 centimetre, 3/8 of an inch. And we want to sew down onto our original stitch line, but we want to go to around about where the notch is. And make sure your stitching is on top of each other, and then back tack off, and then leave the gap and start at the same place at the other end. So start at that notch position, stitch on top of the existing stitching, and then stitch down to the hem. So do the same thing on the other side and then overlock that seam tidy. To do the top stitching detail, you can either stitch it from the front or stitch it from the back. What you need to do is open your garment up so you're just going to stitch the pocket to the front only. So here is my front and here is my back. Make sure your pocket is sitting nice and flat, and then starting at that side seam stitch line, stitch on top of the curve of your previous stitching. And then go ahead and repeat that on the other side. Right, so now let's work on stitching the channel in here for our drawstring. So you'll have a notch here above the pocket, and then you'll have the buttonhole that you stitched in earlier. So take the channel piece that we overlocked the edge of and turn it round so wrong sides are together. So we've got the right side out. I mean, it's up to you, you could sew it the other way, but this is probably nicer. So the first thing you need to do is find the notches here on the channel piece and match that to the side seam, making sure, I don't know if you can see this, let me just move this slightly, making sure that where the notch is on the side seam, it's centered here. So what we're basically looking for is we want to butt one side of that channel to the top of the overlocking here. So when you've got that there, pin that into place. So we want the seam here to face towards the back. The channel here needs to cover the buttonhole. So you'll find it's 3 centimeters from the edge to the buttonhole. So just make sure the buttonhole is centered there on the channel like so. Can you see that? So if things have gone a little bit, have stretched a little bit while you've been sewing, it's not a problem, you can adjust them now. We just need to make sure everything's going to be sewn nice and straight. So do that at one end and then do that same thing at the other end. The seam faces to the back, make sure that is not twisted. Find the notches through the overlocking. There they are there. Basically all you're doing is butting that notch to the stitch line there so the overlocking's together, and that will be in the correct place. There. And then cover in a straight line, making sure you're covering your buttonhole here. And things might have moved while you've stitched them, just do the best you can, making sure that buttonhole is in the centre there. So now you just have to make sure there's a straight line between the side seams. So you've got to make sure that this side is parallel to the bottom of the garment. You can get a tape measure and measure that down if you want, and then hold it all in place. Now the channel I've allowed for is, you guessed it, 1 centimetre, 3/8 of an inch. But you can stitch that bigger if you want, smaller if you want. All you need to do is decide how far from the edge to sew it. So I'm going to still sew this at 1 centimetre from the raw edge, and let's just get started. Now the best place to start the sewing from is the bottom edge at the side seam. It'll be the less obvious. Right, so now let's move on to the shoulders and then the sleeves. So place the front and the back right sides together and stitch in the shoulders at 1 centimetre, 3/8 of an inch. And then go to your overlocker and tidy that edge, and repeat on the other side. There are 3 parts to the View A sleeve. There's a sleeve front, and you know it's the front because it has a single notch. Then you have a centre sleeve, and then you have a back sleeve, and the back sleeve has 2 notches. And there's a pair of each, so one's been cut out this way and one's been cut out that way. So on the centre sleeve, you'll have one side with 2 notches and the other side's got 1 notch. So it's just a matter of matching these together and making sure right sides are together. So I'm going to start on my sleeve back, so there's a double notch there, and when I sew it I'm going to match my double notch here. Now don't forget this is a 1 centimetre seam allowance, so what I'm going to do is simply cut 4mm off, so that's, I'll put the conversions underneath. The alternative would be to sew a seam at 1 centimetre and then edge stitch the finish off. Okay, so now I'm going to find the sleeve front that matches right side together with the single notch here. And I'm going to sew that into place, making sure that notch matches there. Okay, so because I'm sewing this with a sweatshirting, what I'm going to do is give this a light press, making sure the seams are facing towards the underarm, and then I'll repeat that on the other sleeve. So now we're working on the sleeves. If you have the sleeve with the insert, you'll need to refer to the written construction information, but basically what you're doing is sewing the upper part of the sleeves together first, so the side front to the centre front to the side back sleeve, and then you'd be coming ahead and doing this. So when your sleeve is together, we're folding it right side together, and we're going to sew this long edge at 1 centimetre 3/8 of an inch, and then finish it with the overlocker. Alright, so once that's complete, go ahead and do that for the other sleeve, and then we'll work on the cuff piece here. So the cuff piece is a rectangle, and in the centre you'll see a notch. So what we're going to do is fold this right sides together, so the notch is on the fold here, and we're going to stitch then overlock these sides together. So it's really important we do it that way because we need stretch. So what we're going to do is turn the cuff back on itself, so wrong sides are together. We're going to create the opening for our hand. So we're going to take our sleeve and place this cuff into the lower edge. What we're going to do is stretch the cuff to fit the lower part of the sleeve. So we want the seams to sit on top of each other here, but you want to make sure they face different directions to remove the bulk. And then that notch we talked about earlier, you want to make sure that's all lined up with the notch here opposite the seam. So when you've got those positions in place, what we're going to do is stretch the cuff to fit that arm. So now go ahead and overlock that edge to tidy. So once you've done that on one side, go ahead and repeat for the other. So to sew the sleeve into the armhole, what we need to do is, let's just have a look at the sleeve when we start. Up the top of the sleeve you'll see a notch here, and that's called the crown notch, and that needs to match to our shoulder seam. As you come down one of the sides, you'll see a double notch, two notches together, and that shows us that's the back of the sleeve, and that's going to match in to the double notches on the back of our garment. So what we need to do is place this into the garment on the correct side, right sides together. So take your sleeve and place that into the garment. Oh, and you'll also have a single notch on one side here, which shows us that's the front of the sleeve. So what we have to do now is match this into our garment. The seam on the sleeve matches the seam at the underarm, or the side seam. You'll find a single notch on the garment to match there. The crown notch will match to our shoulder seam, and the double notches match together at the back. So when you have those in place, you can sew this together, making sure to ease any fullness out between those places, but it's really important that the fullness is distributed between those places. Generally there's no ease from the underarm to the front pitch point, and the same to the back pitch point, and all the ease is through the sleeve head. So what we're going to do is sew at 1 centimetre, 3/8 of an inch, and then complete that seam to tidy it up with our overlocker. And we want our seams to face towards the back of our garment. So go to your overlocker and tidy that up, and when you're finished, repeat that for the other sleeve. So now let's move on to the zip area and the centre front. You're going to have two facings that look like this, and you may or may not have put fusible interfacing in. I haven't. I probably should. You can get knit fuse. So this is the piece here. You'll have two. You'll have a pair, one like this and one like this. We need to overlock tidy the inside edge. So the side we're doing is the higher side. This curve will have a high side and a low side. So we want to tidy off this high side. So for view A collar, I sewed this without hitting the record button, so I'm very sorry. So I'll explain what I've done. I've folded the collar wrong sides together, and the fold side is here and all the raw edges are even, and then I've started stitching at 1 centimetre. So where you start here, you want that to be at the 1 centimetre line. So on the collar there's a notch to match to the shoulder seams, and the shoulder seams need to face towards the back, and then there's double notches to match to the centre back. So when you've sewn that at 1 centimetre, 3/8 of an inch, go ahead and overlock tidy the edge. So next you can take that facing piece, put it into place, and then if you haven't, you can stitch that at 1 centimetre. Take your band and we're going to sew it to the bottom of the front. So place the front right side up and place the band right side down, and we want to sew a seam here and at a centimetre, but we don't want to take it too far. It probably needs to go 1/2 or 3/4 of the way across this band. Now what we want to do is fold the facing over like so and sew it to the bottom of the band at 1 centimetre. So we've effectively created a big loop there, all right sides together. So the reason we did this is so that we can now sandwich in the zip. Okay, so once you have this strange looking loop, we need to turn this so everything is right sides together. And this is the area we're going to sandwich our zip into. So take your detachable zip and work out which side you're working with. So this is the left side as I'm wearing it, so that will need to go like that, and it will open up like that. So I'm working with this side here, so I'll just unzip that, take it apart like so. Now all we need to do is sew the zip in. which can be a tad challenging sometimes. It depends on how much stretch your fabric has. You could try using a roller foot. What I'm going to do is tack it in one side and then sew the other side together. So I'm just going to pin this so the top of the zipper stop here is just below the top here, like so. So this is where the collar joins in here. I'll turn that light on so you can see that a little bit easier. So that's where that's going to go. And then the bottom of the zipper stop, this extension piece we put onto the band, in the very center there's a notch. So that notch shows us the fold point, and it's the bottom point for the zipper. So the bottom of the zipper there sits like so. And all we have to do now is make sure we stitch that in. And as I said, I'm going to tack stitch it on one side before I sew it in properly on the other. So the only other thing you need to worry about is this tail at the top. Now don't cut them off. It's really tempting to cut them off, but it's not a good idea to tuck them off. What I like to do is just fold them back on themselves. Is it a 45? I suppose it's not quite a 45-degree angle. It's getting between a 90-degree. You need to fold it like this because we're going to stitch here, and it needs to hit sort of on that angle there. So find the seam, make sure the notch, the top stopper is just below the seam. Angle that out like so. And make sure you're only tack stitching through the one layer. And I'm going to tack stitch this in at 5mm, which is foot width, which is close enough to 1/4 of an inch. And as you see here, my joining skills weren't completely precise. Oh, actually they're not too bad when you look at it like that. I'm just going to even out the difference there. So at that point there, you just do what you need to. Here's my middle notch there. So I don't need to go all the way down or back tack, simply because that is a tack stitch. So here is my zipper on the one side. Just check everything's all good. And if you're happy that that's in the correct place, what we're going to do now is fold the centre front facing over. And now I'm going to stitch the centre front facing down to that. Now, normally I would stitch that like this, but I'm actually concerned that this might stretch out a bit, and it might be easier if I have that tape on top. So what I'm going to do is just turn this over, and I'm butting that right into the edge there. Actually, no, I don't think that's a very good idea. I'm going to start at the top and go to the bottom. So making sure that notch is below, match those edges. And so. Now you can sew this, I've allowed 1 centimetre, but I'm actually stitching it at 5mm, 1/4 of an inch, so I've allowed 3/8 of an inch. The reason I'm not going to do that is simply because of this bulk of the Sherpa. It might be really fleecy and start getting caught in these teeth, but you should be sewing this at 1 centimetre, 3/8 of an inch. I might flip that over. Let's just have a look and see how that's going. Yes, that's going exactly the way I want it to, and as you can tell, the top of that is just hidden in. all I've done now is I've just flipped this over, and I can feel the edge of the teeth there with my presser foot. And I'm doing this because the feed dogs often pull the fabric in on the bottom side, and sometimes it can just be easy to use that to your advantage. Now when we get to this join position here, you want those seams to be sitting on top of each other. Now if you struggle doing this, you can always put hemming tape in there, press that on, or a little bit of spare fuse you could fuse onto that to stop that from stretching out. And sometimes what works really well is just to lift your presser foot and just release that. Stitching. So all the seam is going to be hidden, so when you turn that through, there is our zip in place, and as you can see there's extra room there to allow for that fleece in case that gets stuck. Now because my fabric is bulky, what I'm going to do, and to help it to keep away from the teeth, I'm going to top stitch this now, and I'm going to top stitch, it's around about 5 mils, quarter of an inch from the folded edge. So if you measured from the edge of the teeth, it's probably 1.5 centimeters, 9/16 of an inch. But you just do whatever works for you. All I'm going to do is make sure this is folded all the way back on both sides and stitch through. Okay, so go ahead now and repeat that on the other side. So for the other side, we're coming to the bottom, we're going to stitch just a short way at 1 centimeter, 3/8 of an inch. And then we're going to create the loop on the other side. Then we're going to take our zip. We're going to make sure it's the correct way, and that we get the top at the top, like so. Now for this one you might need to just adjust the zip as you go. Be careful to make sure you keep the other layer out of the way, but I'm putting that bottom stop on the notch fold, and I'm going to tack stitch this in around about 6 mil, quarter of an inch. Whoops, didn't mean to tack that off, never mind. Just secure that down a little bit more. Right, so I've just rearranged that so that this is out of the way because it was starting to really annoy me. I'm going to put the top here. Just tack stitch that down before I begin. Just check it all. That'll be fine. Okay, so I'll just ease out difference. So zip it up and check everything is sitting in the correct place, and we'll finish off the band. Right, so the place we're at now is just the trickiest part probably. So your centre front facing is stitched all the way across on one side, so all the way across to the edge of its overlocking there, whereas the other side is only part way stitched. What we're going to do is stretch the band, so we have our bands wrong sides together, and we've pinned at the side seam and the centre back. So match the seams here on the band that we're going to stretch. And then match into it the back part there. And what we're going to do is we're going to start stitching from the edge here, and what you have to do is just sort of like twist this out of the way, and you need to make sure you go as far as catching as far as you stitch the first place. So it can be a teeny bit awkward depending on how far you stitched. If you haven't stitched this one far enough on the back, you might find it easier just to go back and stitch that a little bit further. It'll help you with the turning out. So I'll just stitch that little bit past the seam line so you can see what we're getting at. All at 1 centimetre, 3/8 of an inch. It can be rough, it doesn't really matter at that stage. So there you are there. And what we're going to do now is stretch and overlock all those layers together, making sure that seam is on the edge there. Well, we'll start off by plain stitching and then we'll go to our overlocker later. Now, because it's easier if you stitch with the band on top, go to the other side and do this and make sure it's done first. Okay, so on the other side what you'll find is the band looks like that, the facing looks like that. It's stitched all the way across, so we're going to match those seams there. And you sort of need to just pull that facing backwards on itself so you can start stitching just short of the facing there. It's very hard to show you how in that Sherpa, but I'll just sew a short way and show you what I mean. So if you fold that back on itself, see how we've hidden all of that, and it means because there's no stretch in this add-on piece here, the stretch is in the band, that can all just be nice and flat like so. And then we've caught those pieces in there, so it'll all be nice from the front. So go ahead now and stretch that band to fit, and when you're finished, overlock. So same thing when we get to the other end, you just need to make sure you flip that back over as you go. And you just flip it over and just sew a short way into that facing piece. So it will just tidy the edge up like that, as you see here. And now go ahead and overlock that. Right, so I'm just going to do that joining video from a different fabric with a different view. So here's this insert here and here's your band. So pop your fabric so that everything's on top of each other, and as you sew towards the inset, what you want to do is fold that back match everything up and then just stitch. It's not even 1 centimetre, maybe 3/8 of an inch maybe in there. So when you overlock through here, that then tidies that edge off like so, and we're all good from the other side. Okay, so once you've overlocked the edge here, congratulations, you're done. To make your cords, cut 2 cords, place them right sides together and overlock the long edge. Now using a loop turner, turn that inside out, and if you need help with draw cords, I do have a video on my YouTube channel on how to make these very easily. So turn them inside out so they are now right sides together, and then repeat it again. Now you could of course buy pre-purchased cording, and things like shoelaces from the dollar shop can be really effective in this sort of a garment. So take your piece of elastic that you've cut to the cut chart on the information sheet, and I do recommend to keep it small. You can of course use really wide elastic, but it's always a good idea to keep it smallish. So when you're ready, overlap this by 1 centimetre or 1.5 centimetres, and sew one of these lengths of cording to either end of the elastic. So take a large safety pin and make sure it's nice and sturdy, and we're going to feed this cord through the channel we created. So start off by coming to one of the buttonholes, feed this through and pull it out through the other buttonhole. So when you've threaded those through and pulled them out evenly, you have some options for the ends. You could, because you might want to make sure this draw cord stays whether you pull it, put like a toggle on it, a spring-loaded toggle, so when you pull this up that will hold that in there. You probably will find though that this being a knit, it probably will stay in shape and there's no real need to. When you're wearing it, you could always put just a slight bow, like that sort of thing, in place, which also looks quite cool on the front. So you just sort of do a little bit of a knot there, but you do need to tidy up the ends. So the easiest way to do that is just to trim that off and then just do a knot at the end and then roll the knot down to the very end, and that will stop it unfraying and it'll look really effective. So once you've done that, do the same thing on the other side, and you're finished. You might want to give your garment a press. Thanks so much for joining me, and this is a long video, so I do appreciate that. Hey, and thanks for buying my patterns. Don't forget to join my Facebook pattern discussion group, and also hit the subscribe button to my channel. That'd be great. And I'll see you again soon for the next sew along. Thanks.